about that? Joining me now, JIEFE Weaver, senior advisor to the Bernie Sanders campaign. She says, follow the rules. What do you say?
Well, we do want to follow the rules. The question, Andrea, that was posed to the senator, and what you have to ask yourself is, if somebody goes in with a delegate lead and a substantial delegate lead, should the person who got 25% of the vote be the one who gets picked by party insiders? I don't think so. I think it'll cause a lot of disruption in the party, frankly, and I think a lot of the grassroots folks, who, no matter who they supported, would be very disappointed to see somebody who got 10 or 15 or 20% of the vote picked as the nominee over somebody who, say, got 45% of the vote.
Except that those were the rules that were agreed to, and a lot of the so-called reforms were at the suggestion of people who were loyal to Senator Sanders and felt that he had been cheated last time.
Well, sure, and I was on that commission that did some rules changes. That particular rule, the current superdelegate setup was a compromise that came out after that. But the original proposal was to have superdelegates proportionate to the totals in their states. And that was actually what Senator Sanders advocated for last time in this process. You'll see he appeared a number of times saying that superdelegates should vote the way their states voted.
Now, Senator Sanders, clearly taken by surprise, I think, the Sanders campaign, as we all were, by the Buttigieg and Klobuchar dropping out, Harry Reid, this cluster of endorsements for Joe Biden. And Senator Sanders has criticized it as the establishment ganging up on him. Senator Klobuchar was asked about that by Savannah Guthrie today on the Today Show.
I don't look at the mayor and Beto O'Rourke and myself as establishment. I look at us as new leaders for the party, fresh faces for the party, and we're basically saying we've got to win here, and that's why we're supporting Joe Biden.
Does she have a point that Beto O'Rourke and Pete Buttigieg are not the, quote, establishment?
No, look, Andrea, being young does not make you not part of the establishment. It's about the ideas that you hold. And, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and Beto O'Rourke, frankly, all three of them, no disrespect to them, but they all articulated the same old that Joe Biden is articulating. I mean, except for their age, in many ways, they were indistinguishable from Joe Biden, which is why a number of them had trouble getting traction in this race. So it's not a surprise that they would support him. And in fact, they do support the same old ideas that led to the election of Donald Trump. We tried this last time. The moderates the establishment wanted a moderate candidate. They got their moderate candidate. And you know what we got? We got Donald Trump. And we're heading down that same path again if we nominate Joe Biden. Look, the truth of the matter is that we've got to get the blue wall built back up. That's Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania in order to win this election in the general. That's where all the action is going to be. And the truth of the matter is Joe Biden's record on trade, he voted for every job-gutting trade agreement in that region. And folks there are going to remember that.
Now, Jeff, what about Elizabeth Warren? She seems to be, not getting out. In fact, she's going to tonight be in Michigan, which doesn't vote until March 10th. That's a signal that she's staying in. Does that hurt Senator Sanders, since they share a lot of the same views, the same supporters? And would he be better off if she would get out, since she doesn't have enough delegates to give her a clear path to the nomination?
Well, we have never encouraged anybody to get out of this race. Bloomberg had a memo about that. Biden was pushing people out. Bernie Sanders has always said, whoever wants to run should run, and let's have the voters decide. That's how it should work.
And one other point that Senator Sanders has made is that he is inspiring a whole new cohort of voters, that this is an inspiration, an emotional response, that his base is expanding. The numbers don't prove that, at least from Iowa and New Hampshire. There aren't more people voting, and in New Hampshire, when more people voted, they tended to be from areas that Buttigieg and Klobuchar were bringing in, not from Sanders' areas.
Well, I think if you look at Nevada, for instance, Andrea, which was the first much more diverse state on this process, the turnout among Latinos was phenomenal. Bernie Sanders won Latinos overwhelmingly there, ran competitively with African Americans. I know we didn't do as well in South Carolina, but there's a media narrative that treats sort of all black voters as the same everywhere, and that's just not the case. The sort of commodification of black voters by the media, saying a black voter in South Carolina doesn't matter whether you're rural or urban or college educated or blue collar or men or women. The media does that a lot, and I think that what we saw last time and what we're going to see again is that black voters, just like white voters, are different in different parts of the country.
What does a good night look for you tonight? What do you expect or hope for?
Well, we hope to come out out of here with a delegate lead on the Super Tuesday. I think that's very important. Last time we were in a delegate deficit, which was very difficult to dig out of. You know, I know you had Dan Balls on your last segment saying the upcoming states are harder for us. In fact, that's not true. You know, we're going to be going into the industrial Midwest. We're going to go into Ohio. We're going to go to Illinois. We're going to go to Michigan. And those states are going to be very good for Senator Sanders because Senator Sanders has stood by the workers in those states his entire career while Joe Biden was voting to send their jobs overseas.
And do you have any concerns that Barack Obama, that the former president, is pulling strings behind the scenes?
No, look, you know, President Obama, with great respect for him, he has stayed out of the race, and we appreciate that. And we're just going to run our campaign.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff Weaver. Good luck for you out on the campaign trail. And we will check in with you after we get the votes counted. Maybe a while before we have it all counted for the delegates. Thanks. And coming up.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.